Welcome, friends, to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. You know the drill. We are two retired New York City police detectives, and if you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, so you'll get all things DutyRon and Ed Wallace when we go live or upload another video. Tonight, I have as my fill-in co-host, as always, Melanie Little. She's an attorney. She is here hanging out with us. We're going to be talking all things Bryan Kohberger tonight. Mel, how are you doing tonight? We got great guests for the audience.
We do. We have a great guest. I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ron?
Good. Very good. You know, this preliminary hearing that we were all waiting for Bryan Kohberger was supposed to be happening June 26th. And it was a long wait from the beginning of January till just this Monday. The secret grand jury was convened and Taylor was ready and prepared for exculpatory evidence and all of the conversation that we had. And hey, everyone who's been following this case is just waiting, chomping at the bit for the June 26th preliminary hearing. It didn't happen. Grand jury was convened, secret grand jury. A lot of people have questions about that. He was indicted on the 4 murder charges plus a burglary charge, felony. And then we had his charges officially, arraigned on his charges. Standard stuff as it pertains to criminal justice side, right? But to a lot of the true crime folks, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of doubt now, right? There's chatter. There's people that feel, ooh, this is sneaky. Are they railroading Bryan Kohberger? Are they afraid that Bryan Kohberger is innocent and that they don't have enough evidence? I know the prosecutor's not thinking that, but this is what the people who are following this case, this is what everyone's, talking about. Like Reddit, Twitter, all over the social media platforms. Before we get into it, I just want to say a couple of things because people have been asking about Ed Wallace. He's got a lot of things going on behind the scenes. He's still working. He's got some family stuff that he's dealing with. And you know what? Ed's going to be back, and he's going to be back full force. But in the meantime, we have great guests like Melanie, and we have a former prosecutor who I'm going to introduce right now, Pete Crusco. Crusco, he has been on many times Crime Time with DutyRon. He's 28 years in the Queens DA's office, almost 29 actually. He served 19 as an executive assistant DA, chief of the investigation division. He's got an unbelievable resume. He's a criminal defense attorney. He's served on both sides of the fence. He was a prosecutor, and now he's a criminal defense attorney. Pete, thank you for joining tonight, Crime Time with DutyRon. Everybody loves Pete. How's it going, Pete?
Well, yeah, doing great. Thanks for inviting me. Wonderful being here.
Yeah, and
hey, Melanie.
Hi, Pete.
You always explain everything, as does Melanie, into layman's terms for everybody. And again, like I said, and I set this thing up, is it's people who are in the criminal justice field, like detectives like myself, attorneys like yourself, attorneys like Melanie. This is kind of a ground ball thing for us. But when you have folks who are true crime enthusiasts, they have a lot of questions. The convening of a secret grand jury, I asked you before we went live, and I think I asked you another time on a different case with our boys in California in Bakersfield. I asked you, Pete, as a prosecutor, former prosecutor in the Queens District Attorney's Office, this is a busy, busy borough. Have you seen secret grand juries convened, and why do they do this?
Yeah, well, it was more or less a routine situation in Queens. In Queens, we usually had 4 grand juries. 3 would sit for 30 days at a time, 4 or 5 days a week, and then we usually had 1 that would sit for 6 months at a time that could be extended by court order and by vote of the grand jury. So it was more or less the routine. It's done. Well, number one, in New York State, the law required that to be prosecuted on a felony, unless the defendant waived the grand jury, you'd have to bring it to the grand jury and you'd have to get the vote and make sure that you had a quorum and you had the number of the right people got the vote to sustain the indictment. So, and also there were all sorts of defense motions that could be filed to examine the minutes of the grand jury, to examine the attendance of the grand jury, to determine whether or not there was any prejudicial evidence that was put before the grand jury. So grand jury practice was a big part of my life as a assistant DA, and we carefully scrutinized the proceedings to make sure that the defendant's right to a fair trial and right to be indicted was was upheld, because all of this is reviewable by a court. So, from my perspective, yes, it is secret because it's secret because you have to, first of all, protect the identities of the witnesses, and second of all, protect the defendant from indictments based upon gossip and innuendo and lack of evidence, because obviously the defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty. So we, although we say it, we use the term secret grand jury, and of course, should anyone violate that secrecy, you could be subject to criminal prosecution. It is a routine matter, especially in New York State.
Pete, and I'm going to let Melanie, I know she has some questions for you. They had the preliminary hearing set, and he waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing in January, right? When he was extradited back to Latah County, he was brought before the court, and they were asked with his attorney, do you waive your right to a speedy preliminary hearing? And they waived that right, under my knowledge, to give Ann Taylor, that's his attorney, and she is a capital punishment law attorney hired by the state of Idaho. And there's lots of stuff about her team and the money that she's being paid by the taxpayers in Idaho. But she wanted to have that time to prepare herself. So a lot of people in, the true crime genre here following this case said, oh, that was pretty sneaky that the prosecutors convened this secret grand jury while Ann Taylor was getting ready to, question witnesses. There was talk about, Bethany Funk coming in and the second roommate, and having a chance for them to question them or question the evidence and so forth. How does this come into play, Pete? And then I'm going to go to Melanie after this. How is Ann Taylor now going to be able to question or bring up, as she mentioned, exculpatory evidence that she felt was out there? How does that go now that there's a trial date set for October 2nd?
Well, if Idaho does permit her to examine the grand jury minutes, and I'm not sure what the rules are in Idaho, but usually, if there was exculpatory evidence, it would have behooved the prosecution to present that evidence to the grand jury. That the first question was there exculpatory evidence? Was it in the possession of the prosecution? And therefore, did they violate any duty? She would have to file a motion in connection with the examination and the inspection of the grand jury minutes. Those type of motions are rather routine in New York State. I don't know whether the practice in Idaho, usually does that. Many times it's a discretionary call. If you don't think the judge is going to rule in your favor based upon all the investigation you've done, do you really want to waste the time and effort on something that isn't going to be winning in the end, and instead invest that time in something that may prove to be fruitful?
Right. Melanie, you got anything for Pete?
Yeah, I mean, we had hypothesized all along that there could be a grand jury proceeding happening, and we would not have known about it. So we always knew this was a possibility, and we did, surmise that it could possibly happen. And my thought was that if it was my case, I would absolutely take it to a grand jury, because I wouldn't want my witnesses being cross-examined at a preliminary hearing. So I guess in Idaho, they have the choice. In New York, it's commonplace that we use grand juries. So my question to you is, do you see any benefit to going the preliminary hearing route as opposed to going the grand jury route? Because I just really couldn't think of any. No,
I will tell you that, in 40 years of being a prosecutor, maybe I've gone to a preliminary hearing twice. Most of the time I go straight into the grand jury. The defendant gets notification that we're presenting it to the grand jury. He or she has a right to testify if that's what she wants, but she'd have to waive immunity in the grand jury. In New York is a little peculiar in that the defendant can bring their attorney into the grand jury. The attorney can't say anything. The defendant has to be given the right to make a statement, a full statement as to what he or she wants to present to the grand jury, and then the prosecution could cross-examine to a fairly well, as long as he or she stays within the bounds of the law. So, you know, as I said, Melanie, there would be really no purpose to go to a preliminary hearing unless your witnesses, some main witness was missing. You couldn't find them for the grand jury presentation, and you use it as a stall tactic. Because once again, you know, preliminary hearing, all you need to prove is probable cause to believe the defendant committed the crime and the crime was committed. So, you know, it's essentially the same standard in the grand jury, which is a prima facie case, probable cause to believe defendant committed the crime and the crime actually occurred. So, in one case, the preliminary hearing, you're giving up all that discovery because you have to turn over the witness statements and the like. In the other case, the grand jury, you're not giving up anything until the trial.
Right. And what's interesting about this case is because they said they were going to have a preliminary hearing, they started doing all this discovery and exchanging all of this discovery. The defense filed a motion for an out-of-state commission because one of the surviving roommates, who I'm going to also call a victim, had moved to Nevada. So they wanted to subpoena her to come back to Idaho to testify in the preliminary hearing, which her counsel in Nevada opposed. Eventually, they reached an agreement, withdrew the motion, and went to interview her in Nevada. But we don't know if she testified in front of the grand jury, right?
That's
I mean,
correct.
their argument was that she had exculpatory evidence. So maybe she did testify in front of the grand jury, and then Ann Taylor can get the minutes and see what she said, but they also took her statement. So
absolutely. I mean, you don't know whether she said she saw someone, but she couldn't identify them. And obviously, if there was a preliminary hearing, she could have been potentially cross-examined, and then we would know what she would say at trial.
right, it'd be like a mini trial. It'd be getting like 2 bites at the apple.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I want to play because a lot of people in the chat, and I see the chat. I always look at the chat. We discussed this before we went live. Tonight, Ann Taylor, defense for Bryan Kohberger, made a plea to, I guess, to the prosecutor's office, asking for evidence and everything that they have. And in this piece that I'm going to play, I'm only going to play a couple of minutes of it. She asked, according to this news reporter, for some of the exculpatory evidence that she was referring to in the preliminary hearing that never happened. So let's take a listen to this, and we'll be right back in. This is Law and Crime.
Demanding the prosecution hand over additional evidence they say may be exculpatory. All this after the accused killer enters a silent not guilty plea in the University of Idaho quadruple murders. Thanks for joining us today for Law and Crime Network. I'm Sierra Gillespie. Now, on Monday of this week, a Latah County, Idaho judge entered a not guilty plea on Kohberger's behalf after he and attorney Ann Taylor remained silent. This hearing coming just 1 week after a grand jury indicted Kohberger on 4 counts of first-degree murder, thus avoiding the lengthy preliminary hearing originally scheduled for next month. On November 13th of last year, 4 University of Idaho students were found stabbed to death in their off-campus home. Weeks later, Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania and was extradited back to Idaho. At the time of the murders, he was a PhD candidate at Washington State University, and that's just a minute's drive from the University of Idaho campus. So following Monday's court appearance, the case's judge will now hear a defense motion to compel evidence they say the prosecution already has. To explain what this motion means for the prosecution and the defense, Law and Crime legal analyst.
All right, we don't need a Law and Crime legal analyst because I have 2 of them here with me. So yes, Ann Taylor is busy at work, and that's what any good defense attorney would do after their client has been indicted and then arraigned on the charges. They looked at a 6-week time frame for the trial to trial time wise. And I know this is common. I've heard this many a time, but I was curious to know if Melanie and I, Pete, you have a busy law practice, so you probably didn't listen to this or catch on to it. But did you hear what the judge, that's his name, Judge John Judge, Judge said to Ann Taylor, "Oh, I have some things on my calendar," or I don't know how he referred to it.
I know exactly what he said. I wrote it down. He said, I have some other trials that are conflicting. She originally asked for a trial date just outside the time limit, and she asked for November 22nd. And he said, well, I have some other trials, but this one obviously is more important, or he said, oh, this one is more critical. And then he gave them October 3rd. So he wasn't even going to go for the November 22nd, because what's that? You're right up against Thanksgiving. Then you're right up against the December holidays. So there would have been, I could see why he wouldn't go with November 22nd.
Okay. Well, now that we have Pete here, I have him for 30 minutes. The clock is ticking. We're at the halfway point. Pete, I wanted to ask you, because some bizarre things happened during this, during the not the indictment, but during the arraignment. I don't know why I couldn't think of the arraignment. During the arraignment, the judge sitting on the bench, the presiding judge, Judge, mispronounced 2 of these victims' names. Now, I know that this has nothing to do with legal, but why I'm asking you this, Pete, is some of our true crime fans and some of the people who are following this have asked, sent in messages, not just 1 or 2, multiple people have asked me, will this have any effect on this case that the judge was not able to pronounce? And I'm not saying it in a laughing way. I'm saying it because it was really horrific to hear it. And from what I understand, inside that courtroom, there was 25 family members from various victims' families. And there was a gasp that came from that from the audience, and maybe some words uttered. I hate to put you on the spot with this, but is there any legal ramifications for him mispronouncing names at a at an arraignment?
No, but it does reflect upon whether or not the judge read the paperwork before and maybe asked somebody, how do you pronounce this person's name? I mean, look, isn't it usually just a common courtesy to before you pronounce people's names, you get the right spelling. I know when I was in court, look, my name isn't the easiest one to pronounce, Crusco. So that the judge would usually look at the paperwork, and before he brings in the jury or anybody from the public, he would go to the attorneys. How do you pronounce your name, counselor? It was just a nicety. It was and
I mean, I was horrified by it, because the reason I use the word horrific and horrified is because I felt for the families. I'm empathetic to the victims and families. And if this is something you don't wish on your worst enemy, to have your child, young adult, they're 20 and 21 years old, I'm talking about Zaina, Ethan, Madison, Mogan, and Kaylee Gonzalez. That's what made it horrific for me, is because I put myself in that same position, sitting in that courtroom. And Melanie, you're a mother of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts on that?
He didn't just mispronounce her name. He called her by the wrong name. He called her Kayla, not Kaylee. So it wasn't a mispronunciation of a hard to pronounce name. He also had a hard time with Kernodle, where he actually stumbled over that 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So I think a lot of the chatter is that, like, this has been in the news for so long, and these victims' names have been mentioned for so many months, and you live in Idaho. How do you not know their names?
Yeah.
I also heard that Kaylee's older sister was really offended and actually went up to one of the court personnel after the hearing and said, I cannot believe that the judge called my sister by the wrong name. It was incredibly disrespectful. And the clerk or the court officer, I'm not sure who she was speaking to, said, yeah, I know, I'm really sorry. So Yeah, it just wasn't a good look.
I know if
But,
if
it
I had
happens.
right, but if I had to pronounce the victims' names in a public forum in a court, and I was presiding over a case, I know I would have studied saying their names over and over again the night before or something, and I was just surprised, But I'm again going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he stopped and said, this is tough.
Yeah.
And from what I heard from folks who are local there, that he's a good judge, and he's a good man. So, but it was, again, it was just one of those moments that it just was like, when I was listening to it live, I kind of gasped myself as I listened to it. So that puts that aside because people were asking those questions, and Pete, if you don't mind, I have a sheet of questions, and if you have questions for Pete or Melanie or myself, put #Pete, #Melanie, #DutyRon in the chat. I want to get into some gag order stuff with you, Pete, because this has been something that's been going on for a long time here, and it's got to do with a lot of different variables. It's not just because of internet sleuths and people talking online. It's got to do with the media, News Nation, Nexstar Media. They have a lawsuit. It's not a lawsuit. Is it a suit, Melanie? Yeah, they have.
It's a motion.
It's a motion. So they have a motion along with the attorney for Steve Gonzalez, Shannon Gray. They're challenging this gag order. I'd like to get from you, Pete, and I know this is redundant. We've talked about it in the past. How important and why is the judge putting a gag order on this case?
Well, the judge's duty is to make sure the parties get a fair trial. All right. And the only party that can appeal is the defendant. So he especially wants to make sure that the defendant gets a fair trial. And, if there's too much out in the press and there's too much going on with respect to statements regarding the facts and the circumstances and the evidence in the case, you're going to be impacting the potential jury pool, and it's going to make it more difficult to pick a jury that is not tainted. He also doesn't want a situation where the case has to be moved for a change of venue because he couldn't control the parties or their spokespeople. So it's on him to control this. And although the parties may not be in agreement as to the extent of it, remember, he's got the duty to make sure there's a fair trial and both parties get a fair trial. So that's the short answer on that.
But people question, Pete and Melanie, I know you can expand on this. Folks understand that, and I think a lot of us have a good grasp of that. But when it comes to the public, aren't they entitled to information? Isn't it supposed to be an open forum? The news has the right to inquire about public cases, and this is a public case, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Isn't there some type of some type of something where this is challengeable? Because isn't the public entitled to some of this information? I'm not talking about investigatory information or things of that nature, but like to stop the families from talking. And I know Steve was speaking, this is, again, early on, about a lot of things that shouldn't have been, in our opinion, as law enforcement professionals, as detectives, and as attorneys. He was talking in areas that he shouldn't have been talking in, because it could hurt the case. But I mean, I don't know, Mel, am I overstepping here? I think, I want to just get everybody's side out and to talk about the feelings on how just the general public is feeling about this, because everybody feels like the door is closed.
I mean, I would say, look, they got to weigh the public's right to know against the defendant getting a fair trial. And let's face it, Idaho is a small state. There's only so many places that they can change the venue to. Moscow is a very, very small town. Everyone has heard about this case already. The more misinformation that gets out there, the less likely it's going to be that the defendant will get a fair trial. But I'd love to hear what Pete has to say on this.
Peter?
Well, I will tell you that in my past life as a prosecutor, I had a situation where I had a case in Albany, and based upon potential media highlights of it, etc., the judge was concerned and was indicating that he was going to move us to Broome County, and I would have been, spending my time on the weekends with the cows out there. No insult to the Broome County people, but the fact of the matter is, nobody wants to be in a situation where they have to be moved 100, 200 miles away and inconvenienced. If you can control the flow of information and make sure the jury pool is not tainted, there'll be a lot less inconvenience, cost, and expense to the parties. And the judge has to take that into account too.
Yeah. Hey, look at this comment, Pete. I'm going to highlight it. It says, this is from Rosie. I don't know, where this is coming from, but she said, hey, they can't hold on to evidence until trial. Why did Peter say that? Honestly, just wondering.
I don't know. I don't think it's what. I don't think I said they can hold on to evidence. I said that they could essentially suppress public statements of the parties in order to protect the defendant's right to a fair trial.
That's what I heard you say. I just had to highlight that. I just had to highlight that because I was like, wait a minute, where is this coming from? Midwest Girl sends in a super chat and she says, how far out do you really think this trial would be pushed out if it goes to trial? October seems unrealistic. They're talking about 51 terabytes of files and pieces of evidence. There's
20,000 pages.
Yeah, 20,000. So how realistic is October 2nd, 2023? Melanie, I'll go to you first.
I think if you're the defendant, I think you want it quickly, because I think you want to bank on the fact that they're not going to be able to get through all that evidence and present a solid case. I think if you're the prosecutor, maybe you want more time, because maybe you want more time to gather more evidence. I mean, it could go either way.
Right. Yeah. Peter?
Well, the defense's job is to thoroughly review the evidence and to, do it scrupulously so that they can mount a capable defense. They don't have the time to do it because they're not given the time. If they can mount a motion, an argument that the time frame is unreasonable, I could see the judge saying, okay, we'll give you some more time. And that has happened in my cases. On the other hand, if the judge if the defense gets the evidence in a far enough off period of time that they have the time to review it, and then they claim that they didn't have the time to review it, that becomes problematic for the defense. So it all depends upon how much information they have to sort through and how much time they're given.
Yeah, I wanted to ask too a quick question. People are asking, well, do you think this trial will be televised publicly? I say no to that, because look at what's happened pre-trial, before we got up to the trial. There's been, gag orders and so forth in effect. We saw with Lori Shallow-Vallow, there was no cameras in the courtroom because it was a highly publicized trial. They did that to protect the integrity of the process, right? So there was audio available, but no video. I would say no. What do you think, Pete, on cameras in the courtroom on this one?
I would probably think not.
Yeah,
they can have reporters there doing the pictures and the drawings and that type of stuff, but I would think not.
Mel?
I'm going to agree, because it's Idaho, and Lori Vallow was in Idaho, and she was in Boise. She was in a way bigger county. The town does not need any more of a media circus than it's already become. And I don't think this judge is going to allow it.
Yeah. And there was a lot of people who spoke, the talking heads. I know Bill likes to use that term. I don't use it too often, but I'm going to use it here. The talking heads and people who were speculating on this. And, we hear about all of these sources coming out, and sources you'll hear more and more because of this gag order. But some of the talking heads were saying before we got to the secret grand jury and the indictment that this trial wouldn't go until later in 2024. And there was even some who I heard say early 2025. Now we're looking at October 2nd, a tentative trial date. I feel that, this small Latah County courthouse wants this situation, this case, to be tried expeditiously. They don't want to drag it out. I feel that there's a strong possibility that if it's not October, it may be November. But I think that the court, the judge, and everybody involved wants to have this trial start sooner than later. Pete, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's probably right, because it's probably taking a lot of energy and effort and costs to the whole case, and there's a lot of scrutiny on the court. So absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, we're at the 30-minute mark. I know you got to run, Pete, but Melanie and I are going to stick around with this. I had like a couple of more questions, but I think we covered them all. I just want to make sure. Okay. So here, this came in from Schmitty, and I think we covered some of it, but she sends in so much great questions and engagement. But Schmitty's channel member, great friend of Crime Time with DutyRon. She said, what's the purpose of a standing quiet while it's an automatic not guilty plea entered by the judge? Is this some sort of tactic that can benefit Bryan Kohberger on or before October 2nd trial date? Thank you. And, just saying thank you.
Well, I think that's the question. I don't think we really have an answer on that. There's a lot of speculation. Right. And part of the speculation goes to whether or not it's going to be part of some defense later on.
Right. But do you see any type of benefit behind him not actually saying not guilty in court?
Well, just off the top of my head, I would say that there may be quite an outcry when he says not guilty in the news media, etc., and he avoids that by standing mute. So,
And do you think that was on advice of counsel, or do you think he made, and I know this would be speculation because nobody knows exactly, but would a criminal defense attorney advise someone to, hey, just shut it and let's go with this, being silent and letting the judge enter the plea?
Well, my own experience is I tell the client what the options are. Then I tell the client what I recommend. The client usually makes the decision. So I would think that would be one of the options that the defense attorney gave. And then it was up to Bryan as to which option he wanted to take. This option, at least, it doesn't cause a big response in the courtroom or in the media. So perhaps that was the reason. I don't know, but that would be my guess.
You mentioned something before we came on the air about because Idaho does not allow the insanity defense, there may have been some strategic decision for him to stand silent. I just don't recall what you said.
That's a possibility too.
What would be the thought process behind that?
Well, at this point, if he keeps his options open, so it can't later be said, wait, you said you were not guilty, and now you're saying you're not guilty because of some mental defect or some other issue. So it's just keeping your options open, essentially, and that was probably or possibly one of his thought processes. We just don't know.
Do you think he's going to be a difficult client?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He looks like the type that is a know-it-all type. He's gotten a little bit of knowledge, and he's going to have some banter with his attorney regularly, but that's part of the job. It'll be a job for the defense attorney, but that's what she accepted.
Yeah. Pete, I want to say thank you so much for spending 35 minutes. I got 5 minutes of overtime. Your rate is high on the overtime, so I might have to do a GoFundMe or something.
Thanks so much. You take care.
Yes.
Nice seeing you, Melanie.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Pete, for joining us.
We keep
Stay
talking.
all well.
We
Take care.
keep talking about it. We have to have dinner sometime. Me, you, Joe,
Yes.
Melanie's out there in Long Island. Maybe we could all get together.
Okay, great.
It's on Long Island, Ron. We are on Long Island.
She's in Long Island.
Long Island.
She's
We are
in
on
Long Island. Pete, she's in Long Island.
Guys.
Melanie.
Hey, that's good.
We're on an island. You don't go in an island.
Thank you.
It's a big island. It's a big island.
Yeah.
Well, apparently Ron lives
get in
here
it.
and he doesn't know it's an island.
You got to
He's
get in
on
there.
it.
You got to jump in.
We
All right.
just don't want to commute. That's the thing. Don't commute on and off Long Island. That's what becomes a problem. But, all right. Anyway,
Thanks
so
for
much. Great seeing you.
There he goes, Pete Crusco. Thank you, Melanie. This case again is going to always bring up lots of questions, lots of controversies, lots of rumors, sources,
lots of emotion.
Yeah, we keep hearing sources because the thing of it is because of this gag order, people want information, and when you're not getting it from the courts and you're not getting it from the defense or the prosecution, or you're not getting anything, this is what starts that whole process of, people coming up with rumors and speculation and thoughts and sources. And, I talked strongly about sources the other day when Banfield comes out and says we have our sources, and if Ed Wallace said it good. He's in the chat here. I know he's working tonight.
Oh, yes?
He said, wait a minute, hold on. He said something about this controversy. What about me? There is only one island, Staten Island. There you go.
The island of paradise.
There you
Staten
go.
Island.
Ed and I said it months ago. If these are any type of sources where it's law enforcement related, investigatory related, from the district attorney's investigation squad or anybody that's involved in this case, they should be brought up on charges and arrested, in my opinion, because leaking out information to news media before a trial commences, before we even had an indictment, is, you might as well just be on the wrong side of the law. And that's how strongly I feel about it. And I know Ed feels the same way. I'm glad that he's here in the chat. These things just get me crazy. And I know a lot of people who are wanting and needing information love it. They love it and they want more of it. But it's so it so hurts the case.
What is the information that everybody wants? I mean, we're going to get the information in the form of a trial. Whoever's leaking, first of all, I can't believe that the grand jury wasn't leaked. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
That nobody found out about that. I mean, they say it's secret, right? But in a case like this, where everybody's on top of it every single second in this small town, and the media's all over it, you would think.
Well, in the case of Sincere and Classic, Orrin and Orson West, they can be the secret grand jury. I actually had wind of it. I knew that it was happening. And I never once said a word to anybody. I didn't go to the news and tell them, hey, they're convening a secret grand jury. I knew about it. The community knew about it. I think they brought in 58 or more people to testify. People, just folks, close to
witnesses,
biological family.
It's 60 witnesses,
Yeah. So it was it was amazing that didn't get out, because people knew that they wanted justice for these 3 and 4 year olds. And if you want justice for these 4 college students who were brutally murdered, we don't even have the details. We will, at the trial, when the trial commences, we will hear about how they were murdered, how brutal. And there was talk that Kaylee her injuries were much more significant. And that's another thing that was released by her family. Her father said it on Banfield, that there was significantly much worse injuries to his daughter. And I think, that's what got the courts and the judge and the prosecutor to push for a gag order, because that kind of information you don't want out before you even had a collar. You didn't even have somebody in custody at that point.
Right.
Crazy. I want to play this this Banfield clip. You know what? I'm not even going to play it because I'm telling
Is
you.
this the one with the father?
No, this was another one where she talks about the firing squad. But you know what gets me crazy about Banfield is like weeks ago she came on the air and she said, she was talking about burner phones and how drug dealers and bad people are the only ones that have burner phones. Her words, right?
Yep.
She goes, "Oh, but I have a burner phone." And she's talking to one of her colleagues, and she said, "I have a burner phone, and I use it to call Bryan Kohberger in jail."
Mm-hmm.
And
So I'm waiting for him to call me on that burner phone so I can have an interview. Right.
So crazy to the 10th degree. So let me ixnay this Banfield thing. But I do want to play. I'm going to have to because it's Banfield that interviews him. So we have a gag order in place, right? We have a gag order. And last night on Banfield, we have the father of Kaylee on with his attorney. Now, last time I checked, Melanie, before we go into this, the gag order is still in effect. Yes or no?
The gag order is still in effect, and it's overly broad, some are arguing, because it extends to the families and the attorneys for the families, which is typically not covered under a gag order, but this one is.
Yeah.
So is this interview in violation of the gag order?
I think so. And not only does she interview the father here, she asks him, and thank you for pointing it out, if things about the case.
She asks him about his conversations with the victims' advocates and whether they told him if they're going to seek the death penalty.
All right,
I would think that would be something explicitly covered by the gag order.
Crazy. And I'm going to have Cindy Holenbeck, who's in the chat, if she can chime in, because we're going to wrap it up after this. Cindy, if you want to call in, I know you have some questions, and I'd like to hear from you. Cindy is a local Pullman, Washington resident, and also close to Moscow, Idaho. This is her town. This is where her son went to school. So, all right, let's let this play.
Steve, thank you so much at this time for joining me tonight. I know that this has been just a hell of a day, not just for you, but 25 family members with you. Can you give me your reaction to what you saw transpire just feet away from you in that courtroom today?
It felt good to get some progress. We've been delayed as long as they could possibly delay us. I'm ready. I'm ready for this to go on and lay out the case and let the community see what the evidence is. And then, let the cards fly where they're going to go. There's been a lot of weird processes, things that were done in a way that are there to help everybody and help the witnesses, the surviving witnesses. But I'm just ready for the normal court process and normal justice, and just get back to what, we kind of learned in school. And that's what I want to see. I want to see just lay it out, transparency. Everybody gets to see what, their evidence is, what our evidence is. And then we let the jury members decide what's going to be real.
Steve, it's been almost 5 months since the defendant walked into that same courtroom, almost looking the same, sat in the same seat beside the same lawyer, and you were there. Did it feel any different? Are things falling into place more differently now as you lay your eyes upon him today, knowing how much more you know now than you knew back then?
Well, I know he wants to be an active participant in the process, so that kind of changes it for me. Before, he was just somebody that was dragged into a court that was probably surprised to be there. Now he's an active participant, and to me, it's I'm a competitive person, so I'm like, all right, it's on. It's us versus them, and we're gonna lay this evidence out, and we're gonna go from there.
How was Christy today, and Olivia? And Olivia brought Kaylee's baby niece with her. How did they do today? How did they get through it?
The girls struggle. The girls have a harder time with it. And, it takes weeks for us to just talk it through and like, you know, maybe watch a couple movies, do a couple different things, like some family gatherings. The girls are very much, I don't let this guy mess with my emotions, but the girls, that's just the way it is, and I don't fight it. I just understand that they have a different way of processing pain and this anguish. So then we just work together and support them. And, it's just one day at a time. And some days are tougher than others, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Makes sense. There are 60 days from now in which the state has to make its intentions known if they're going to seek the death penalty. I know the state hasn't shared a lot with you, and Shannon has been very upfront about the fact that it's been very difficult working within this gag order. But have the victims' advocates within the state at least shared with you that this is an intention of theirs to seek the death penalty in this case?
We're working with members of the government in Idaho. We're trying to establish that.
I'm going to stop it right there. So that is Banfield, getting her interview and
pushing the boundaries of the gag order to trying to get him to violate it. It's almost like come on, violate the gag order. Come on.
It's almost like she entrapped him, played on his emotions. Listen, I want to put you on. I want to give you he's been silent. And so is Shannon Gray, because they have been abiding by this gag order. And now there's an arraignment on an indictment on the charges. And now it's just free game. It's just,
I'm very confused by it. I don't understand how this happened. I don't understand how his attorney let him go on the show. I don't understand why he didn't stop his client from answering that question.
Right. But
he just let him go. He didn't say, don't answer that. You could be in violation of the gag order if you start discussing your conversations with the victim's advocate and or the prosecutors.
Right. But prior to this interview, she interviewed Shannon Gray solo. And I want to just play a little bit of that because she talks about the gag order and how her company's fighting it. And so this is Banfield right before she puts Steve on. She puts his attorney on solo, and listen to what she had to say.
In the case at the county level decided to as well. And he's had an uphill battle in his work representing the families, many actually, not just the Gonzalez family, but also he's helping to represent some of the other families as well. And he's had an uphill battle in his work because the judge in the case at the county level decided to impose a gag order, and there is quite a robust effort to fight that gag order, not only on my part and my colleagues in the media, but Shannon, on your part as well. So can I start, though, with today and this sort of remarkable turn of events? I want to get your legal reaction to what you saw today, both a refusal to enter a plea and a request for, a speedy trial to begin October 2nd.
Well, I mean, procedurally, everything was in line with what he had the right to do. He could have took the stand in silence or plead not guilty or guilty. All right,
I'm not going to play this any further, but I just want to show the audience that not only did he appear with his client and not say a word, but prior to the client going on with Banfield, he did a solo interview where he exclusively spoke. Now, I don't know if that was legally the way he was able to do this, but either way, the way I see it, and you guys could let me know in the comment section down below or in the comments here live, we have a gag order. The families have been silent since January when the gag order was put in place, or whenever it was. I don't know the exact date. Mm-hmm. Shannon Gray, we haven't heard a peep from him. And now all of a sudden the floodgates are open. This is not a good thing. It's not a good thing.
I would hate to see, and listen, I have the utmost respect and sympathy and empathy for the families.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I can't imagine what he is going through. And I understand that he feels like he wants to get out there and tell his story and talk, but I would hate to see him jeopardize justice for the other families by doing that. And that's my fear here a little bit. And I know he says he's very competitive and he's a fighter and he really wants to get out there and talk, but there are other families involved too, and we have to consider their feelings as well.
Yeah.
So it's a slippery slope, Ron. It's a really slippery slope.
And it's dangerous. It's dangerous because, we're talking about 4 people here who were murdered.
Yeah.
And this is Steve's daughter. And you know, if it was my child, I would be livid about this. And you know, he definitely would be. This would not be something favorable. 1030 Melissa, I can't highlight this message, but it's on my secondary device. She's a member for 17 months in the DutyRon silver level. She says, thanks for all you do, DutyRon. Your professionalism is top notch. Thank you for that. Always has been. Much love to you, my Irish friend. Now, this is my Italian friend. This is our standing joke. I always call her a good Irish woman. She lives in Italy. So thank you, Melissa, for that beautiful message on the members only chat. Cindy is in the green room, and she gives me the thumbs up. I want to add her. She's a resident, local. She's been on Crime Time with DutyRon. She's a supporter. She's a Patreon. She's a friend. I love her. Cindy, welcome. How are you?
Hey, hi.
What's your thoughts on Mr. Gonzalez speaking last night on Banfield? And I hate to put you on the spot, but you're a local. You're invested in this case, just like all of the residents and folks in Moscow. Were you surprised to see Shannon Gray and Steve on Banfield last night?
Actually, I have so much to say about the entire show, but I'll stick to what you're asking me. Yeah, I'm like you. I think Banfield is garbage. So I think that she's just a ratings hog. So it's really sad that she did that.
You're being kind.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the fact that I don't watch her anymore. I quit watching her after she had Zaina's mom on. So
Yeah.
that was my line in the sand.
I don't blame you. I'm definitely not a big fan of hers anymore, and I'm actually ashamed to say that I did make an appearance on Banfield once.
Oh, don't be.
But it was for Gonzalo Lopez. That was for the prisoner who escaped over in Leon County and wound up killing a family and annihilating a family of 5. So I went on and did an interview with her. But you know what? My days of that are done because
I don't think we should be held accountable for every single solid thing we've done in our past. Yeah. And I'm sure back then you had no idea that this was going to happen.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I want to say right now I need to stick up for Judge because I have heard people mangle Zaina Kernodle's name. Absolutely. not Kaylee, but Gonzalez. They've called her Goncalves and Gonclaves. And ever since, I mean, come on, let's cut him a little bit of slack. Zaina Kernodle, that's not John Smith. That's not Jane Smith. And I heard that he was choking up, that he was actually having a really hard time. And I just want to say, I've been a member of this community for 30 years. Judge did the adoption when my ex-husband, Eric, adopted my daughter, Josie, when she was 9 years old. Judge was the officiator of that.
Right.
I love Judge. And his wife, Mary, used to be the writing center director at University of Idaho when I was getting my Master of Fine Arts there. I know these people like I know like my brother. So I understand he is in a position where he probably should have practiced the names ahead of time. I know, and I'm in public relations. If it were me, I would have practiced the names ahead of time. But man, people have been mangling those names for almost a year now, and we have to just cut him a little bit of grace. So,
you know, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Melanie, go ahead.
Right. Oh,
also,
yeah.
Imagine how nervous he is, right?
Oh my gosh.
This is the biggest case Idaho has seen since, I mean, you know,
yeah.
Lori Valley, but
different county.
You know, he's so nervous. He takes his job so seriously. He has just been assigned the biggest case of his life, probably of his career, for trial.
And he's a grandpa.
He's nervous. I mean, I think
we
have to give
little
him some
grandbabies. Yeah, him and his wife are just the kindest people. And I was sitting there. I was so excited Monday morning. You know, I went to work and I was super late. Like, I always get to work late because I don't like work, but I know, but it was 1:45 and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get in there. And of course my computer was slow. But then you know, and I love him, and everyone kept saying, Judge, 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 Judge. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait because I know him. And then when he was stumbling over the words, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for him. And then all of a sudden, you know, in light of every other thing that's going on, he's what, 50 feet from this guy that, you know, maybe did these horrible things. And so I just, you know, and like I said, I felt sorry for him. And then I talked to Anjanette Levy, and she said that people were saying that he sounded like he was getting choked up. And so if he was getting emotional on top of it, that's something that a lot of us would not have known.
Right. So here's the thing, Cindy. And I know you're in the chat while we were talking about it.
Yes.
I have to give both sides of the fence here. So what I was doing was, you know, giving a perspective from if it was me in that position, and then I'm looking at what everybody's saying in the general public. So I played both sides of this.
Oh,
because,
sure.
you know, when you're doing a podcast like this, you need to visit both angles. And for me, I just said that, you know, again, those names should have been rehearsed. He should have known them. He didn't, and it happened. And like I said, I knew from you, and I knew from Miss Burkhart,
Yes,
Attorney Burkhart. Yes. She mentioned Judge before all of this had took place. She was on my channel, I believe, in the early part of the year, around January or February, and she mentioned Judge to me.
Oh, did she?
While she was live. So I've heard his name mentioned, and she said what a great judge he is. So I'm not taking anything away from him, but
not you, Ron.
No, I know, but that conversation had to happen because it was everybody was speaking about it. But so we also heard yesterday from Madison Mogan's father as well. He made a statement as well. So I want to be fair about this. And again, Viking in the chat says judges are human. Yes, we're all.
Let me tell you, you can rehearse something and rehearse it and rehearse it and rehearse it. And I can tell you that I'm also an actor. You can rehearse your lines a million times and know them, and then you get there and you screw them up. Right. So I think he didn't rehearse.
Let's go to the chat because I want to be fair to the chat. Everyone's been very patient, and I want to say hello to all of the channel members and all of the subscribers and anyone that's new. If you can, please consider giving this video a thumbs up. Subscribing to this great community, Melanie, Cindy, Ed Wallace, myself, and all the professionals. Jennifer Nobles is in the chat. Nikki Bella, who's always out there. Michelina Serino, Dawn Marie, our moderators. Erica Olson. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on. Miss Donna Marie, she's probably one of the nicest people I've met thus far on YouTube. She's right up there with the Cindy Holmbecks and and everybody. I mean, just such a gracious woman. So, look who's there. Who do we got?
This is Gus, and he gets so jealous when I'm on YouTube. So he's my 12-year-old German Shepherd, Newfie Black Lab.
Oh, look at
him. And his head is as big as mine. So there, he says hello. Okay. So you wanted me to ask a question, and I have actually two questions, Melanie. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm really bummed I didn't get to say this to Pete. Ron, he was talking about Broome County. Did you get that?
I saw you said you're from Broome County, but he was talking about Broome County, upstate New York.
He was, and I wanted to say, hey, you're talking about my old stomping grounds, and we've got way more than cows, but that was hilarious.
I've been to Broome County to pick up a prisoner twice, and it's cold and it's far.
And it also rains there. There's so much humidity. It rains like we get record rainfall 80% of the year. Anyway, yeah, I felt sorry for him. But Melanie, two things. So one is kind of more of a comment / question. Mm-hmm. And thanks, Dawn Marie, I made sure to have my hair look nice tonight. So one of the things that I heard a lawyer say, because I've been listening to some stuff, they said that the silent, we're staying silent, was a tactical maneuver. So Kohberger didn't out loud, and Pete kind of said this too, he didn't out loud say he wasn't guilty, or he didn't out loud say not guilty, because later on that's going to serve him well. So have you heard of this before?
I don't know that it's going to serve him well. I think he's so egotistical.
Right.
He does not want that soundbite out there.
Gotcha.
That's my take on it. I mean, I
Okay.
think you could interpret it a lot of different ways.
Okay.
The first way to interpret it is your right to remain silent. You have the right to remain silent. That is
Right.
the number one Miranda warning.
Okay.
So him standing silent, maybe he's making a statement. Maybe Ann Taylor tells all her clients to stand silent, and that is her procedure. We don't really know.
But you haven't heard like that that's something that later on you wouldn't use that and say, oh, well, I didn't say it out loud, so et cetera, et cetera.
Legally, I don't think legally there's a basis for that.
Melanie, correct me if I'm wrong. I asked Pete outright at the end before we let him go if that was a tactical maneuver, and he was like, no, because whether Kohberger says, not guilty or guilt, he doesn't say anything. It's still on record. The stenographer puts in not guilty plea. So it's like he pled silently. But for the record and officially in the court of law, he has put in a plea of not guilty, whether he said it or not. And I believe, and I've heard many attorneys talk about this, that it can't be in his favor because there's nothing that they can bring up. Hey, I wanted to play this clip where we hear from Madison Mogen's dad, because he says,
because I didn't hear this.
He says something very, very powerful here. And he talks about therapy and going to seek therapy after this happened to his family and to his daughter. So let's take a listen to this, because I don't want everyone to jump on the bandwagon that Mr. Gonzalez is the only one that spoke to the media. He did speak to him, and it aired on a non-Banfield channel.
There grew emotional, wiping tears from their eyes. Kohberger's arraignment comes just 1 week after a grand jury formally indicted him on the 5 charges he already faced. Community members on the grand jury believed prosecutors showed enough evidence to move forward with the case and bring it in front of a district court judge. Judge John Judge read Kohberger his rights and explained the first-degree murder charges he faces carry a penalty of life in prison or death. The judge then asked if Kohberger was ready to plead.
Do you understand the charge in count 5, murder in the first degree? Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
And Ms. Taylor, is Mr. Kohberger prepared to plead to these charges?
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
And because Mr. Kohberger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas on each charge.
Former Ada County Chief Deputy Prosecutor Gene Fisher told me standing silent doesn't hurt the defendant. Quote, if anything, standing silent could help the defense if they intended to file a motion of Kohberger's competency. They wouldn't want him assisting the court by answering legal questions and then turn around and file a motion saying he's not presently competent to stand trial. The state has 60 days now to decide whether they plan to seek the death penalty. The judge set Kohberger's trial for October 2nd, giving both sides 5 months to prepare their cases.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
It's expected to last 6 weeks. That timeline could always change between now and then. 2 other hearings happened after the arraignment, one regarding the media and Gonsalves family's fight against the gag order in this case.
There's a lot of potential irreparable harm from media that is affecting a fair trial.
The 3rd hearing Monday morning, setting a date for arguments over evidence. Kaylee's family shared a statement with me saying it's important we keep the victims' memories alive. They're grateful for the grand jury indictment, but are disappointed the judicial process hasn't been more efficient in changing the gag order. This weekend, Madison's dad shared with NBC how special his daughter was.
I want people to remember Maddie as just being a loving, caring, just beautiful person who everybody just misses so much, and we're just all so proud of. And this has been the most difficult thing that any of us will ever go through, and it's just important to stay close to your loved ones and your family in times like this, I would say. I mean, a lot of us are going to counseling. I've gone to counseling, and it's helped a lot, just being able to talk about things and remember her in the best way that we can and keep her memory alive.
So there's that piece. Very powerful,
It's a much different. That was a much different interview. That was a much different statement.
Right. And again, I wanted to play that because to show the contrast.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Yeah. He's not speaking about the case. He's speaking about how it's affected his family and how nobody should have to go through this. And
there's so much softness instead of there's a lot of anger, and they're both valid. They're both valid. You know, emotions are emotions, but like Mr. Gonsalves is so angry.
right.
And Maddie's dad is, and maybe going to therapy is why, and it doesn't matter. Like I said, they're both valid, but by the way, tomorrow they're having this movement. I don't know if you guys know, but it's called Maddie May Day.
No.
Because I think tomorrow might be her birthday, and her name is Madison May Mogan, and tomorrow's May 25th.
Oh, okay.
So I've been seeing it on Twitter. So it's Madison May Day, and tomorrow's a day of kindness. Everyone's asking. So I'm going to put that out there.
And I heard something about pink was her favorite color, and that people are going to bring pink tulips and plant pink things and wear pink and
cowboy boots.
I heard there was an Instagram about it, but maybe I could find it now and refer people to it. What did you say? It's called Maddie May Day, you think?
It's called Maddie May Day, and I saw it on Twitter, and I think it's her birthday. I'm not going to swear to that.
I saw that too.
Sense.
All right. So Angela Coleman says May 25th is Maddie's birthday.
Thank you. Okay. So Maddie May Day. Everybody have a nice, peaceful celebration of her birthday tomorrow. You got it. Okay.
I've got it. Okay. So it's
the full screen.
here's the well, it looks backwards, right? It's Maddie, Maddie, May Day, and it says honoring Madison May Mogan and her legacy of spreading joy by performing random acts of kindness on her birthday, May 25th.
Right.
www.maddiemayday.com. Follow them on Instagram, please.
I'll link it down below in the description.
Whatever support you can. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea, and I love this so much.
Tomorrow is the 24th. So isn't
okay.
I never know what day it is. So
I'm looking forward to the 25th.
This will be on Thursday.
So if you can, send that to me in a link, and then I'll link it in the description so everybody can get it. While I have you here, Cindy, I want to ask you, this is again off topic a bit, but since I have a local resident, the conversation of demolishing 1122 King Road, that is still on the table. Have you heard anything about the plans? The University of Idaho now owns 1122 King Road. Can you tell our audience if you've heard anything about it?
I'm sorry, I keep.
No.
Uh-oh. Just
don't move, Cindy. You froze.
It's just, like I said, my dog is this.
Did he chew her cable?
I don't know. She's frozen.
All right, I'm going to take her off.
I'm here. Hold on.
Wait, Cindy, do that button.
No.
Remove. There you go. All right, I'm going to wait for her to come back. Okay, she sat back down. All right.
Okay, I just sent you, Ron, the Instagram for Maddie May Day.
I have it.
Okay.
I have it. All right, so
and Ron,
I asked about
Twitter.
the plans.
Right.
Yes, I'm on Twitter.
Yeah.
So
you're on
I asked you
so
the plans.
Right. I'm sorry. My dog wanted a ball that was under the computer desk, so I had to get up and get that. Okay. So yeah, I heard what you said about the house. So you saw that they've got the fundraiser, right, for the house for the memorial garden.
Right.
I've told you about
what's
that. Okay.
The plans? They had last spoke that they were going to. It should have already been demolished, but it's still standing.
Right. Well, I can't.
Anjanette Levy from Law and Crime went there. Brian Enton went there. There's a guard booth with an air conditioner inside of it.
I know it's not the weirdest thing.
Going to be demolishing it anytime soon.
Well, I haven't heard anything because the only stuff I can get off is the University of Idaho website. And I haven't seen anything updated since the last time that you and I talked, and it was supposed to be demolished before the end of the semester. I'm speculating that they're not doing that because there's been so much outrage from there's too much unrest. There's no there's not a solid state of yes from anybody. Okay. So the university said yes, and then it was supposed to be demolished, and it isn't.
Right.
Everything's boarded up. It looks so eerie and creepy out there. And there has been, so you have to tell me, because I've heard conflicting that the families want to keep it or the families don't want to keep it, because I've heard two different stories, and that I don't have good information on that.
Yeah, I don't think we know either. I don't think anybody knows. But the last time we saw and was put out there, the university made a statement on their website that they had planned to demolish 1122 King Road within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then that never happened. And for me, and even my partner Ed Wallace said, keep it. Let it stay until after the trial is over, and then you could do whatever you want. Now it's in a controlled, fenced off environment. You have a guard booth there. Nobody's going to come in and trespass there. So I think that it's in the best interest of justice to keep it there in case a jury wants to go out. And as we saw in the Murdaugh trial, they went out to the kennels, the dog kennel where the crimes were committed. I think it's a good thing, and I think that they should hold that, because what is the upside to demolishing it before justice is served? I don't see any. And let me know what you think down below in the comment section. That's the best that I could say, and I think, Melanie, you concur.
Lorraine Lawrence in the chat says the court asked the university to wait until the trial, and the college agreed. I can't confirm that, but I think that's the right decision. I know that we were against tearing it down because we felt like the jury should tour that house and the crime scene based on the fact of the layout and how weird it is. And, 3D rendering isn't going to do it justice. I mean, you have to really go there, I think.
Okay, thanks, Lorraine. I hadn't heard that. And Melanie, you'd said something earlier about, when you were all talking about how the secret grand jury came up, and I don't know, it's like, I had always thought Bill Thompson was the one who was in a hurry, not the defense team, but I feel like the prosecuting attorney's in a hurry. Like Bill's like, let's get this over with. So now I wonder if there's been any pressure to get things moving because of that. I mean, I don't think that would really be the only reason, but I feel like Bill Thompson's like, I want to get justice done. That's just my own personal opinion.
I agree. I think it's in the best interest of the community. It's in best interest of the families. Nobody wants this thing to play out because look, the bottom line is here, this is a classic death penalty case. This is going to be a death penalty. This trial is going to be.
Put a crown on it.
So, if convicted of all charges, we're still looking at a good decade or more of appeals and all of the bullshit that goes on in a death sentence. He won't be seeing a firing squad or lethal injection for a decade or more.
Right. 20 years typically.
Yeah. So we could be looking at 2 decades, and that's just about the norm. So why take and drag out this process when we know on the back end, and the prosecutor knows it, the defense attorneys know it, Kohberger knows it, it's going to be a good long time after this trial is over and he is convicted before he gets sentence imposed. So that's the thing. Listen, what this is about, and I'm going to wrap it up on this, is these victims right here. These 4 victims, this is what it's about. It's not about our wants and needs. It's not about anybody else's wants and needs. It's about bringing justice for these families of these victims right here. And there's no other better way to say it. And if you keep these 4 victims at the forefront before you talk and before you say harmful and hurtful things, and you think about these 4 people, these are young adults. You may want a second, give it a second thought before you say hurtful things in regards to this case. Because their families are watching and listening and watching social media, as you know. So be that better person. Don't jump on the pile. Don't be a bully. Don't go after don't just follow the leader. Take the high road when it comes to this stuff. Because I could tell you from the profession that I was in, it's not a good thing to have to go to families and say your loved one was brutally murdered. It's a tough thing to do, and I've done it, and so is Bill Cannon, and so is Ed Wallace, and all of the folks that I get around from the NYPD. It's not something that's pleasant. So Melanie, I'm going to go to you for final, and then we'll go to Cindy.
Well, I think this was a great discussion. I think I'm very happy that they used the grand jury process. It frees up the 26th of June for the media circus that was sure to continue until then. Trial set for October 2nd. My gut feeling is it's going to be pushed because I know the defense wanted late November, which is a good extra 6-7 weeks. And they probably will need that to prepare based on the mountains of evidence that they need to go through. So my feeling is it may get pushed to the beginning of next year just because of all the holidays and everything. And they don't want to break up the trial with breaks in between. So we'll see what happens, but justice.
Yeah. And I think the next circus that we'll see leading up to is the June 9th gag order hearing. I know, Banfield and all company will be going day in and day out and leading up to those days, talking more about sources and so forth. So that'll be our next court hearing for the gag order, and maybe the judge will make a final ruling. My opinion, if you're asking me what I think, the gag order will remain in effect. Judge is not going to go against the grain and try to open the floodgates for more people to just start paneling up and talking about this case and speculating and hypothesizing and theorizing. It's not necessary. What's necessary is to get a fair and impartial jury assembled, have the trial, have it done in a fair way, so none of the sides can argue, and especially the defense. Cindy, your thoughts from somebody local in Pullman, Washington, very close to Moscow, Idaho. What's your final thoughts for everybody here in the chat?
I just want to say thanks for having me on, and Melanie, it's so nice to be able to talk to you. Ron, I respect you and love being on. It was really weird. It was really weird to have the arraignment so quick, and I was kind of thrown for a loop. I couldn't sleep. Being brought into this again. I just hope that everybody, I mean, you always think that nothing like this can happen in your area, right? And then the Dateline episode, there was a 2-hour Dateline episode, and to be somebody who's a true crime person, and then to see your neighborhood on TV. And when Bryan got pulled over on the WSU campus, that's the building I work in where he got pulled over. And you guys, it's weird, it's surreal, it's insane. And to think of these beautiful young people that were murdered on the campus that I went to school at, it's just heartbreaking. So let's just give everyone some grace. Let's hope for justice, and hope I can sleep tonight. Being friends with you, Ron, has been an absolute blessing in my life. So that's all I can say.
Thank you. And Cindy, the feelings are mutual. You're a wonderful, wonderful human being. My wife and I continually talk about you, and we thank you for giving yourself and giving us that local perspective, because that means a lot. You don't see that on many podcasts. And I know that you do go on to some others, but
sure. I just want to make sure people get it. It's a privilege for me to be able to tell the local perspective too. So thanks.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about this tonight. We didn't touch on this, but we were going to, is that the city of Moscow has been financially devastated by this case.
Well, first COVID kicked us in the ass.
Yeah. Well,
right.
But financially, the investigation and going over budget and the property taxes that they collect are not covering all of the expenses that are being incurred, and it's really devastating to a small town. And we can't forget that either.
Well, no, and
you're not equipped for this. You can't prepare for something like this,
And if you look at my Twitter, I have it pinned. I'm not a pinner, but I had to pin when and I wrote this in the chat earlier, and I know we're going over, Ron, But people were talking. Well, when we talked about it, about how they were able to keep the secret. Now I'm all emotional. Let me get straight here. The
Grand jury.
Thank you. This is why I need people. How we kept the grand jury secret. Not I didn't, but how they did. It's because you look at like Chief Fry and all of them. And I was on listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about this. Those guys were amazing in what they did. And I actually got into a fight with my daughter because my daughter, who grew up in Moscow and went to Moscow High School and now lives in Portland, so she thinks she's all special. And I was saying how amazing it was that Moscow PD knew immediately that they needed to get the FBI. And she's like, well, of course they did. And I was like, hey, it says a lot for a PD to be humble enough to say, we need to go outside our jurisdiction. And she kept saying, of course they did. Of course they did. And I was like, no, I want to make sure I say this to you. It says a lot about them that they went out of it. Like, stop saying, of course they did. Some places might not have done that. And am I right, DutyRon?
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
Okay, like to be humble enough to say there's no way we can handle this quadruple murder by ourselves, to me says a lot about Chief Fry and everybody else. I mean, I love those guys so much, and that they were able to solve the 7 weeks? Isn't that right?
Yeah, it was within that period of time. Right. And Cindy, Moscow, Idaho is not the only ones that have been in this position. We covered the case of the boys in California City. That police department was a 13-member police department, and they were not equipped. What did they do? They reached out to the FBI, and they reached out to Bakersfield Police Department, Bakersfield Police Department is 700-800 members. It's like a small army compared to California City. So they knew that they were in over their heads, just as we heard Fry and Captain Lanier, right?
Right.
So I highlighted that with Ed Wallace, how awesome that was, that he reached out to the Idaho State Crime Lab right away, the FBI, and he threw the kitchen sink at this thing. Right. So kudos to the small town police departments across the America that do the right thing and that take their pride and put it aside. And we have the other side of the fence where they don't do that, and it's disastrous. And who is it disastrous for? It's disastrous for the victims and families. So you guys did a great job. You should all be very proud. And I hope one day I can get into Moscow, Idaho, and shake the hands of Chief Fry and Captain Lanier and all of the law enforcement there locally, from the NYPD right straight to Idaho. I would love to do that. You've already set me up with somebody from the University of Idaho for the Ring video doorbells that we donated in the names of Ethan, Kaylee, Zane, Madison. So you're doing such great stuff with connecting me with the right people to try to do the right thing over there from afar. So thank you for that, Cindy.
Oh, thank you. And I can't wait for you and your wife need to come here so we can go eat at Mad Greek, where Maddie and Zaina used to work.
I would love it. I would love to do it. So thank you for that offer, and thank you for being a friend. I'm gonna end it with the photo of these 4 victims. And
Melanie, I hope to see you again soon on here.
Thank you, Cindy, so much for joining us.
Sure, you bet.
Guys, please light up the chat. I'll leave it on for about 30.
Thank you, everyone, for being so sweet to me.
Yeah, we love you, Cindy.
Wonderful.
Love you guys too.
So for the next 30 to 60 seconds, I'll leave the pictures of our victims here up on the screen, and then we'll end the video. Thank you, Melanie, for being here. Much love and respect to everybody in the chat, and thank you to the replay viewers and everybody who has positively engaged. Good night from Crime Time with DutyRon.
Good night, everyone.